Good morning and shalom aleichem to everybody. My name is Moshe Schwed, director of All Daf. Thank you to all those that are here live, here in Lawrence, Cedarhurst, at the Young Israel of Lawrence, Cedarhurst, who have come to our Siyum on Masechta Beitzah. On behalf of the OU leadership, Mr. Moshe Rubin, who's here, Rabbi Hauer, and Rabbi Dr. Josh Yoseph, who's here as well. We'd like to thank Rabbi Trump and Young Israel Lawrence Cedarhurst for opening up their Beis Medrash for this wonderful Siyum. The All Daf platform is dedicated Lilu Nishmas Meir Ben Chaim Waknin, who was from Casablanca, Morocco, who unfortunately passed away during COVID-19. But now he has the schus of millions of hours being learnt in his memory. Yehei Zichrei Baruch. The Siyum and our previous Siyums have been dedicated by the Goldberg family in memory of Elliot Goldberg, Yitzchak Isaac Ben Harav Eliezer. We thank the Goldberg family. Elliot was somebody who I have not met, but he was someone who had a disease which had a life expectancy of 5, and he lived till 47. He was in and out of the hospital over 250 times. Perseverance. That's what we all need as we learn the Daf day after day. Yehei Zichrei Baruch. We're here today to pay tribute to a very special person, a Holocaust survivor, Mr. Moshe Rubin. And his grandson will tell us the story in a little bit, how he got to using All Daf. But there's something very personal I would like to share. I was sent an article about a book, a memoir that Mr. Rubin wrote, and I realized that he came on the boat with the Kloisermager Rebbe and learned in yeshiva in Sheretz HaPleita in 1946. Now that was a group of Talmidim who came on the boat with the Rebbe, and he literally took care of them. He was their father, figuratively and literally. And what's my personal connection to that? Besides that, the Kloisermager Rebbe was my sandik. Both my grandfathers, my paternal grandfather and maternal grandfather, were Talmidim of his. He actually stayed by my paternal grandfather, Muncie, many times. But my maternal grandfather, Mr. Shia Brisk, actually came on the same boat and learned in the yeshiva with Mr. Rubin after the war in Williamsburg in 1946. There's a picture. It's not a very clear picture, but Mr. Rubin and Mr. Brisk are both in this picture of Talmidim of the Kloisermager Rebbe. This is available online for a better view. I haven't had a chance to hear Mr. Rubin's complete story, but who's coming in right now?
No, right.
Shalom aleichem. I'm Rabbi Elefant. Shalom aleichem.
I'm listening to you every morning, midnight.
And I have to get my wife to do that.
Where are you going?
Gonna go over here, I think.
Good morning, Mr. Rubin. Thank you so much for coming. I was mentioning to the crowd that my grandfather, Mr. Shia Brisk, was in yeshiva with you together in Kloisermager in 1946. I spoke to him last night. It's been a very long time since we've been together. His brother was Yudel Brisk, who passed away over 20 years ago. But my grandfather, Reb Shia Brisk, is alive, Baruch Hashem. And I wanted to tell everybody that both Mr. Rubin and both Mr. Brisk are learning Daf day after day after day. And there's one thing I want to share. We have a lineup of speakers here. I don't want to take the time speaking myself. There's a Gemara, Masechta Beya, that we're finishing. Daf Chafei Amid Beis. Tana Mishpei Divrei Meir. Mipnei man nasna Torah li Yisrael. Mipnei shehein azin. Why is Torah given to Klal Yisrael? Because they're stubborn. they're brazen. Many learn this in the negative sense, that we were given the Torah in order that the Torah should help us calm our stubbornness and should have ashpah on us. But others learn, including a Ramban, in Parshas Ve'eschanan. The Ramban says on the pasuk, is in Perek Zayin, pasuk Ches, Lo mirubchem mikol ha'amim, chashak Hashem bochem, vayivchar bochem ki atem ha'ma'at mikol ha'amim. Hashem gave us the Torah. Hashem had a cheshek specifically in us, even though we're a small nation, not as big as many other nations. The Torah says, Ki mehavas Hashem eschem. Hashem has a special love for us. And the Ramban says, Vayivchar b'chem mikol ha'amim. Why did Hashem choose us? Shetiyu atem segula loy v'nachla. We should be for him a school and a nachla. We're the inheritance of Hashem. Va'amar hatam. And the reason is, Ki mehavas Hashem eschem. Hashem has a special love for us. Therefore, Bachar Bochem. He chose us. Why is that? Shara eschem ru'uyim lehis ahev lefanov. He saw that we're the ones who are going to show love to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And he chose us la'ahava Yoseph mikol ha'amim. Now the Ramban says, and he brings our Gemara. The Torah didn't tell us why Hashem chose us. Just told us that he chose us because of that love. But what is that love? What's the significance of that ahava? Someone chooses somebody, a nation, that they're going to be able to persevere in anything that comes their way. That love is going to be continuous and never break. HaKadosh Baruch Hu knew that about us. We could be soivel. We can accept this ahava, and we will continue loving HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Yisrael ru'uyim lakach mikol am. Klal Yisrael, they're the ones who are roi to love Hashem no matter what comes our way. And he quotes our Gemara, Kamosha Amar Gimel Azimheim. There are three things that are Azim. One of them is Yisrael ba'umais. Ki yamdu loy b'nisyonos or Yehuda Yitzalov, which is a medrash. Klal Yisrael is going to stand nisyonos. And we come to this event when we have Mr. Rubin, and I connected to my grandfather, who are both Holocaust survivors who came together with the Kloisenberger Rebbe. There's no doubt that the Rebbe imbued in them this ability to withstand this Yonus. And we'll just end off something that my grandfather says publicly, and I'm sure Mr. Rubin feels the same way. Every Daf Gemara learnt, every child born is Nekama, is a revenge on Hitler Yamach Shemai. So let us all continue and take these lessons, this inspiration, to be able to continue learning day after day. I'd like to call upon Rabbi Yaakov Trump, who's the Marda Asra here in the shul, to say a few words and introduce the rest of the program.
Today is a very joyous day to be joining with Moshe and Elaine on this very special simcha, on this Siyum. This is a simcha for our shul, and it's a simcha for Klal Yisrael, as we join together with All Daf and the many tens of thousands of individuals around the world who are celebrating today. Moshe and Elaine are builders of moistos, Torah moistos, here and across the world in Eretz Yisrael, and builders of family. And we're celebrating both of those today. I want to make a special mention to really the person who pulled this all together, and that's Rabbi Simon Taylor, who is the connector in this. When Dr. Yoseph Gurevich came forward to him and was just talking to him about how significant the All Daf has been in his life as a busy physician, as a professional, as a father, as a husband, as a son, as a grandson, and how he's been able to learn the Daf through All Daf. And then he mentioned that his grandfather is also learning the All Daf with Rabbi Elefant as well. And that was such a special connection that a grandson shows a grandfather how to connect to this incredible Olam HaTorah. And today is our first meeting, the opportunity of Moshe and Rabbi Elefant having that opportunity to come together to celebrate that scene. What a special, special moment. It says so many things about everyone, about Yoseph, about Moshe, about the family, about All Daf, about Rabbi Elefant, his ashpah, and the continued learning. This is not Moshe's first cycle on the Daf. It's not the second. Moshe's been learning the Daf for many, many decades. And in fact, this reminds me of the Gemara in Beitzah itself, Daf Teitelbaum and Aleph, where the Gemara tells us that there was a slight dispute in preparations of Shabbos and how to prepare for Shabbos. One perspective was that of Shammai. They said of Shammai Azaken that he did the following. As Shammai would get ready for Shabbos, Kol Yom Avoyo Oichel Lichvoy Shabbos. Matzah Behema Noah Omer Lo Zul L'Shabbos. He'd find a beautiful animal, he'd set it aside, he'd find a good cut of meat. On Monday, he'd put it aside, and this would be the Shabbos meat. Matzah Acheres Noah Hemenu Meniechas Hashnev Oicheles Arishana. He'd find another one that was better, and he'd put aside. The first one, he actually eats at L'Kovod Shabbos. And the first one, and the second one, he would put aside for Shabbos. However, Hillel, his colleague, had a little bit of a different perspective. Hillel Zaken Midah Acheres Haisalai. He behaved differently when it came to preparing for Shabbos. Shekol Ma'asov L'Shem Shamayim. All his actions were L'Shem Shamayim. And therefore he says, Shenemar Baruch Hashem Yom Yom. Every day he'd enjoy. Every day he'd have the opportunity of enjoying the experience of life. The Shulchan Aruch actually talks about, the Mishnah Berurah points out, that we paskin, generally speaking, in this halacha, our hanhaga is really actually like Shammai. Generally speaking, we try to move towards Shabbos. We try to put things away, so we're preparing for Shabbos. Hillel agreed in principle. All he disagreed with was, do we try to test, do we exercise our emunah to know that Hashem will provide more in the future? And I thought about this Gemara, and it reminded me, just a few short years ago in this very room, we celebrated Moshe and Elaine with you on the beautiful book launch of Moshe's book. Moshe wrote a book, Plucked from Fire, and just a few years ago, here in this room, we gathered together and talked about this book as it was dispersed among the many friends with Rabbi Teitelbaum, with the Bnei Akil who care so deeply for the Rubins together. And it reminded me, because at the end of the book, Moshe, you write, and this is dated already now, because it's already a few years, but you said the following: I have Blianora 22 great-grandchildren, 16 grandchildren. Many grandchildren of survivors are in yeshivas. This is a Kiddush Hashem. Despite it all, they are learning. And you continue to say, and I quote, Achash alti meis Hashem, shivti beveis Hashem kol yemei chayai. I now learn more than before. Even though I learned in yeshiva more hours, somehow my learning has more meaning, because Hashem gave me the opportunity of life, where I was sick and I became better. I still have questions. La'achar me'ah ve'esrim. Hashem will explain perhaps. But I'm thankful for what Hashem has given me. I thank Hashem every day that I was plucked from fire. Baruch Hashem Yom Yom. Thinking about the future, the Yom Shekulo Shabbos, and preparing for it. But also being able to say Baruch Hashem Yom Yom and enjoying every moment. The future and the present merging together. And that's why it's so special that this Siyum is really about the connect of all the generations, Moshe, which is Torah. 94 years, and connecting you to your family is Torah. That's what you and your grandchildren are doing. That's what Mitzvah Hashem, your great-grandchildren will continue to do. This is a very special moment. I want to take a moment to thank the many people in our shul. Just for a moment. Magid Shirim, starting up till very recently at our 5 a.m. Daf. Magid Shir, Dr. Howard Bariskin, just went on siesta now, starting with David at 5 a.m. Our 6 a.m. Daf, Dr. Alan Goldman and Ben Sion Levovitz, who give that every morning, consistently. I want to thank Rabbi Chaim Mezer, for his Daf, his 8:30 Daf every morning. The 8:30 p.m. Daf with Baruch Gross every day. Our retired Magid Shir in Daf Yomi, Dr. Yaakov Shalev, who gave I believe 3 machzorim. And also a very special welcome to Dr. Hillel Abramson, who is also on the All Daf, doing the history on the Daf every day. This is a special simcha for our community. Zeh Yom Asa Hashem, Nagil of Nismecha Ba Moshe, Be'ezras Hashem, Moshe and Elaine should celebrate many more Siyumim, be gesund, together with your family, your children, your grandchildren, and your great-grandchildren, with all of us together.
Before I call up Rabbi Elefant to make the Siyum, I would like to thank the Rubin and Gurevich families for making this happen and for dedicating the Siyum in honor of their father and grandfather. And like Rabbi Trump just mentioned, it's unbelievable how you have people who came over after the war who have dozens and dozens of children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren who are shomer Torah mitzvahs, learning and davening and doing chesed. something which we all have to thank Hashem for. Rabbi Elefant.
This is obviously a very special day, and it's a special day for me that I have the schus to meet Mr. Rubin. I also am a child of survivors. Both my father and mother were survivors. So we were brought up with the shadow of that world all the time. And to have people who are still here that connect us to that world is very, very important and very meaningful just to me, and I'm sure to many. The Gemara at the end of the Masechta tells us a Bracha. As we know, much of the Masechta has been focused on the halachas of muksa. And unlike in the world where we live, so no one would think of shechting or slaughtering an animal on Yontif, because Baruch Hashem, there are refrigerators, there are freezers, and we have all the meat that we need prepared from before Yontif. They lived in a world where there are no refrigerators and no freezers. So if you wanted to have meat that wasn't spoiled on Yontif, you would shecht an animal Yontif in the morning and prepare it and eat it. But as we learned in this Masechta, animals are usually muksa. So the Mishnah and the Gemara discuss which animals are and which aren't muksa. And we'll learn this a little quicker. Tanabonan, Elem Midbarius, Elem Baisis. Which animals are considered that are out in the desert and therefore are muksa, and which are baisis, which are domesticated and are not muksa. Midbarius, Kosh Yotzes Pesach, they go out Pesach in the spring, V'royis Be'efer, and they out of the city. V'nechnasus B'revir Rishon, and they come back this time of the year during the rainy season. Ve'elem Baisis, which animals are considered domesticated? Kosh Yotzes V'royis Chutzot Chum, they go out of the city every day. Or Ba'as V'lonis B'toichet Chum, and every night they come back. Rebbe Omer, Eilu V'eilu Bais the same. All of the animals that we've described till now are considered domesticated. Eilu Hein Midbarius, Kosh Yotzes Be'efer, they go out. Vein Nichnasus Liyishuv, animals that don't come into the city. Not in the summer nor in the winter. Ask the Gemara. But obviously Rebbe is drawing a distinction between the two types of animals, which means that Rebbe is concerned with muksa. Ask the Gemara, Rebbe muksa, is Rebbe concerned with muksa? Ask the Gemara, Reb Shimon bar Rebbe mi Rebbe, Petzile Tmorim, a type of date that were not yet ripened, and are put into baskets for ripening. Are they considered Reb Shimon, who we know throughout the Masechta had this lenient approach to muksa? Are they muksa or not? Amalei, and Rebbe responded, "Hey, muksa Reb Shimon. The only thing Reb Shimon considers muksa are groigris etzmukim. Groigris etzmukim are figs and raisins that were put out to sun dry, and while they're drying, they're totally inedible. So here, Rebbe is concerned about muksa, and here he isn't. Answers the Gemara, Ibai Seima, 3 terutzim. These animals that are out of the city are out of our mind, and therefore they're muksa. Vibai Seima, Ledvar Rav Shimon Kama. Rebbe was explaining what Rav Shimon would hold. However, he does not agree with Rav Shimon, and he has a stricter interpretation of muksa than Rav Shimon did. Vibai Seima, Ledvar the Rabbanan Kamalahu. Rebbe was speaking to the Rabbanan, and he was saying, Lidadi, my personal opinion is a muksa. I don't hold of muksa. Eletchu, you who do agree to the concept of muksa, have a stricter approach to muksa. If they indeed go out during the spring but come back as the rainy season begins, the Baisasain, they ought not to be considered muksa. Vamle Rabbanon, and the Rabbanon said, no, even though they come back eventually to the city, Midbari is saying they are muksa. Before I say the Hadran, I'd just like to express for a moment the thoughts that are going through my mind. If one thinks of Masechta Beya, the 40 blot of Masechta Beya, what is the theme of the entire Masechta? I think the theme, there's one word which can properly describe and define what we learned at this Masechta. And the word is hachana, preparation. The Masechta taught us it's not preparation that a Suda Shabbos, a Suda Yontif needs hachana, that on Shabbos and Yontif, hachana may not be done. We can't cook on Shabbos for Sunday. We can't cook on Yontif, even for the first day Yontif to the second day Yontif. But of course, when we think about hachana, I don't think hachana is only limited to a physical preparation, to cooking food and shechting animals and baking bread. Hachana is an attitude and a concept in life. We're supposed to look at life as a hachana. We're here for a reason. We're here to accomplish something. There's an incredible Chassam Sofer. As soon as Rabbi Schwed, who deserves a lot of credit, and Simon Taylor told me about this incredible event that we're going to be having today, the words, the Torah that came to my mind is a beautiful vart from the Chassam Sofer. The pasuk says, "V'yisircha Hashem Elokecha b'fri bitnecha." Says the Chassam Sofer. There's an incredible Rambam that the Rambam writes in his tshuva. The Rambam writes, "Ashrei mi shekolov yom b'mehera." Really, we shouldn't ask for long life. The Rambam says we should be brought to this world to accomplish what we need to accomplish, do what we have to do, and go back. But nobody wants that. Why not? Says the Rambam, because we're here in this world not just for ourselves. We're here to teach and to serve as a model for our families, for our children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and not only for our family, but for the people that we live with, for the community where we live, and maybe even past that. V'yisircha Hashem Elokecha. Says the pasuk, V'yisircha HaKadosh Baruch Hu will give you arichas yomim. You'll be zoicha to have a long life, even though you've accomplished what you need to accomplish. Because b'pri bitnecha, that your children and your grandchildren, you should be able to live and serve as a model to your children and to everyone else. And when we have the schus to attend a siyum with an individual who is a living example of that, is there a better definition of the word hachana? Is there a better definition of the word hachana? I have the president of the OU, Mr. Moshe Rubin, is here. I want to recognize his support to our All Daf project. We have some other prominent members of the OU, Mr. Shimon Questel, who is a former president of the OU and was chairman of Kashrus for many years and is a very close personal friend. A person I certainly have to get along with, Mr. Moshe Smith, because he's the treasurer of the OU. So the rabbi always has to get along with the treasurer. And we have, of course, the chief operating officer of the OU, the executive, our new executive, Dr. Josh Joseph. But Moshe and I have a friend, a common friend. His name is Rabbi Ben-Zion Twersky, who works for us. He's the son of Rabbi Michael Twersky, the Milwaukee Rebbe. And he sent me last week, I didn't know why he sent it to me until I knew that we have the Siyum today. He says that his great uncle, the Bava Rebbe, says such a powerful vart on yesterday's parsha. He says that the pasuk says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives Noach the instruction, tzei min hateva, leave the teva. And the Bava Rebbe asked, why did Noach need to have an instruction? He knew that the water had receded. He had sent the Yaina, and the Yaina didn't come back. So he knew that the Mabel ended. So it's time to go out. Why did he need to get a directive, tzei min hateva, leave the teva? The Bava Rebbe said, when he said this word, and he writes it in the Sefer, he said, we, the Holocaust survivors, know pshat in that pasuk. He said, Noach was scared to leave the teva. He knew he would come out of the teva to a world of destruction. To a world there was nothing left. The entire world was destroyed. Just Noach and his family and the animals that were with him were the only survivors. And Noach didn't want to see that. until HaKadosh Baruch Hu instructed him, say min hateva, you must go out. And he says, so was the feeling of the Holocaust survivors. Those individuals who we don't know why specifically those individuals, HaKadosh Baruch Hu decided that they should continue to live. They were scared to wake up in the morning after what they had experienced. They were frightened about what the future held in store given what they had just experienced. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu told every one of those survivors, say min hateva, leave that world. And you leave that world and go and rebuild a new world. Go and rebuild a new world. And if we are today in the company of such an individual who shows us what it means to rebuild the world, who shows us, as the Klozmer Rebbe, Zechet Tzadik Levracha, taught us, that the only thing that we need to build on is just on Torah. Torah is Nitzchias of Klal Yisrael, is the eternity of Klal Yisrael. And we have a Talmud of the Rebbe Zechron Levracha here, who took that lesson into his life. He took the lesson of Tsei Min HaTeva, leave that Holocaust and rebuild the world. And in conclusion, there's a fantastic story. After the war, there were a group of survivors that came to Israel and were in Tel Aviv. And at that time, after the war, in Tel Aviv lived the Belzer Rebbe, Reb Aaron Belzer. Anyone who ever heard or read about him knows he was a very, very holy person, a Kaddish v'tohor. And these people, broken people who came to Israel after the war with nothing, he was asked if he could speak to them. He wasn't really a speaker, but to such a request, he could not say no. And he sat with them and he said, there's a pasuk that we all say every day, Oz Yoshe Moshe. The Gemara says, Tchias hameisim and atayra minayin. How do we know something that is a fundamental part of our belief, that Mashiach will come, that there'll be Tchias hameisim, that we will all reconnect? Tchias hameisim and atayra minayin. How do we know that there will be Tchias hameisim? So the Gemara says, Oz shor loy nemar. The pasuk doesn't say that Moshe sang. That's what the pasuk ought to say, that he sang. It says, Oz Yoshir Moshe. Moshe Rabbeinu will sing. When will Moshe Rabbeinu sing? When Mashiach comes, b'meher b'yameinu, with Tchias HaMeisim. And the Belzer Rebbe asked, why in the entire Torah that HaKadosh Baruch Hu choose to teach us the lesson of Tchias HaMeisim right by the shiur? So he said, the pasuk says, as Klal Yisrael left Mitzrayim, v'chamushim olu b'nei Yisrael me'eretz Mitzrayim. And if you remember, from when we were little boys and girls, we learned Rashi and Chumash says v'chamushim, two pshatim. One pshat, Rashi says v'chamushim, they went out with armory. But the other pshat is v'chamushim, 1/5. Only 20% of Klal Yisrael survived. 80% of Klal Yisrael did not survive. So he says, think about it. Klal Yisrael came to Kriyas Yamsuf. 20% of Klal Yisrael were survivors, 80% were not. So there couldn't have been any individual of these survivors who had, statistically, who had not lost a close relative, who had not lost a neighbor, who had not lost a friend. Yet how did they sing? How do people who are experiencing Avelis, losing such close family and close friends, sing? So said the Rebbe, that's the lesson, and that's what it means to be a Jew. We cry, we mourn for the generations and for the communities and for the people that we lost, relatives, friends, entire communities, entire Jewish cities. But a Jew doesn't just cry. A Jew also sings. A Jew believes in the future. The future of Klal Yisrael. People who suffered so much, but Tsei Min HaTeva, left that Teva to rebuild and start again. And we, who are the children and the grandchildren of those survivors. Whatever we accomplish, whatever we try to accomplish, is because we are only building it because we were inspired by watching parents and watching grandparents. I just was speaking to someone here who grew up in Borough Park, where I still am. He says, when we grew up, everybody we knew had a number on the hand. Everybody was a survivor. But those people were the people that inspired us, that they didn't wallow in their sorrow. They weren't people of shiur, of speaking about the past. They were yashir. They thought about the future. And if we can have such a successful program like All Daf, and Baruch Hashem, now we have All Parsha. If you look at all the people who are the builders and the presenters of these programs, we all come from the survivors. We are all children and grandchildren of those survivors. We are all Talmidim of the survivors. HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us the schus that such Yidden, such people still exist, that they could serve for us inspiration. When I was told about this program, so somebody said, Mr. Rubin's going to meet his Rebbe. I'm not the Rebbe. People like Mr. Rubin are the Rebbe. People who live and learn Torah and teach their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren how a Jew is supposed to live. They are our Rebbeim. And Klal Yisrael should give him and his family and his wife the koyach and the gezint, that he should be able to continue serving as a role model to all of us. Amen. You say that, Hadran? Okay.
Thank you, Rabbi Elefant. Rabbi Elefant acknowledged the many OU board members that are here. I want to thank Dr. Shalom Yubefeld, who is from our initial All Daf supporters. One of the first shiurim we had on All Daf was from Dr. Abramson, the Jewish history in Daf Yomi, and Dr. Yubefeld stepped up and has been sponsoring this year for the last 2 years. Thank you. Proud member of Young Israel R in Cedarhurst. I'd like to call upon Dr. Yoseph Gurevich, who's going to make the Hadran, and briefly fill us in how he connected his grandfather, Mr. Rubin, to All Daf.
Thank you, everyone, for coming for today's Siyum and to celebrate Zaidi's commitment to learning the Daf. A special thank you to Rabbi Elefant, Rabbi Schwed, Mr. Tesser, and the entire All Daf team, and to Rabbi Taylor for helping coordinate everything to make today possible. I grew up in Boston to Russian immigrants and developed a love for Yiddishkeit and learning from my parents. I met my lovely wife Yael while in college at YU, and during this time, despite the commitments of being pre-med, I was able to maintain learning by having a Seder every morning at YU. It was during my time at YU, around 13 to 14 years ago now, when I began to get to know Zaidi. I was inspired by his energy and passion for learning. Every morning, he would wake up early, exercise, daven, and do the daf prior to his workday starting. He would do the daf at the White Shul in Far Rockaway with Rabbi Flaum and Rabbi Kanner. He always had a sparkle in his eyes when talking about the daf, and it was evident that he cherished this essential part of his day. As the years passed, I personally struggled with learning. The demands of medical school, residency, and fellowship were enormous, and that coupled with Baruch Hashem having 4 children, I found it very hard to have any sort of learning during this time. Unfortunately, during these years, Zaidi had many medical challenges and lost some of his physical capabilities. However, whenever he could, he would continue learning, which included learning the daf, though now it would be alone and not with the Maggid Shir. I finished my fellowship around 2 years ago, and I had a few months before starting my new job. It was a time of introspection, and when I thought about my learning, what bothered me was that the good excuses I had for not learning, for what had been years at that point, were still just excuses. I felt that I had to make a change and find a way to learn again while balancing the responsibility of working full-time and raising a family. It was several months into my new job where I saw the Daf Yomi cycle was about to start, and I knew it was something I had to do. I recall exactly the first time I used the All Daf app. There was a rally in the city that I attended in response to an increase in anti-Semitism at the time. I was on the bus to the rally when I began learning the Daf with All Daf. The ride to the rally flew by. I learned more on the train ride back home, and from the first day using the app, I was hooked. I forget when I had the idea of introducing All Daf to Zaidi. I think there used to be a Rav Rubin who gave the shiur, and maybe that gave me the idea. But at its core, the reason for it was the simplicity of the app. With 2 clicks of an icon, he could listen to the current Daf Yomi shiur, something that gives him so much pleasure. I found an old phone of mine, which I see Zadie brought here today, downloaded the app, and the rest is history. While there have been a few times I've had to troubleshoot the app for Zadie since he started using it, for the most part, over the past year or so, he's been able to listen to Rabbi Elefant shiur by himself. When I visit him, he always has a radiant smile when discussing it and has told me many times the amount of joy it brings him. The happiness and radiance I see now brings back some memories of around 10 years ago when Zadie was more physically active and would be able to go to the Daf Yomi shiur in person. I would like to end by thanking several people. Thank you to Rabbi Teitelbaum for being a pillar in the community for decades, especially when Zadie was more active and able to be in shul more. A big thank you to Rabbi Elefant for giving this shiur that provides Zadie with so much enjoyment and from coming down from Brooklyn today. Personally, I would like to thank Rabbi Trump, Rabbi Leibowitz, Rabbi Resnick, and Dr. Abramson, whose shiurim I often listen to. To all the Rebbeim who are involved with the All Daf app, I know that the countless hours are spent in preparing the shiurim. During this, while also handling all that comes with community rabbanus, as well as personal matters, takes an amount of effort and time that I cannot measure. My family, and I'm sure all of the All Daf community, are truly grateful for the countless endeavors that are done in order to make Torah accessible for all of us. Thank you. Hadran alach Masechta Beitzah v'Hadrach alan, Datan alach Masechta Beitzah v'Datach alan, La nitneshe minach Masechta Beitzah v'la titneshe minan, La be'alma hadein v'la be'alma de'ate. Hadran alach Masechta Beitzah v'Hadrach alan, Datan alach Masechta Beitzah v'Datach alan, La nitneshe minach Masechta Beitzah v'la titneshe minan, La be'alma hadein v'la be'alma de'ate. Hadran alach Masechta Beitzah v'Hadrach alan, Datan alach Masechta Beitzah v'Datach alan, La nitneshe minach Masechta Beitzah v'la titneshe minan, La be'alma hadein v'la be'alma de'ate. Yiratzal milfanecha Adonai Eloheinu v'lehi avotenu shetiyeh toratcha u'munatenu ba'olam hazeh u'tehil imanu l'olam haba. Chanina bar Papa, Rami bar Papa, Nachman bar Papa, Achai bar Papa, Abba Mari bar Papa, Rafram bar Papa, Rakish bar Papa, Sricha bar Papa, Adza bar Papa, Daru bar Papa. Ha'arev na Adonai Eloheinu et Divrei Toratcha befinu u'v'fifiot amcha Beit Yisrael v'niyeh anachnu v'tze'etzeinu v'tze'etzei amcha Beit Yisrael kolanu yodei shemecha v'lamdei Toratecha. Me'ovai techachmeni mitzvotecha ki l'olam hili. Yehi libi tamim b'chukecha leman lo evosh. L'olam lo eshkach b'chudecha ki vam chiyitani. Baruch atah Adonai lamdeni chukecha. Amen, 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 salav ed. Modim anachnu lefanecha Adonai Eloheinu v'lei avotenu shesamta chalkenu miyoshvei Beit HaMidrash v'lo samta chalkenu miyoshvei Keranot. She'anu mashkimim v'hem mashkimim, anu mashkimim l'divrei Torah v'hem mashkimim l'dvarim b'tilim. Anu amilim v'hem amilim, anu amilim u'mekablim sachar v'hem amilim v'einam mekablim sachar. Anu ratzim v'hem ratzim, anu ratzim l'chayo olam haba v'hem ratzim l'ver shachad. Shenemar v'eta Elohim toridein l'ver shachad anshei damim u'mirma lo yechzu yemihem v'ani eftach bach. Yehiratzal lefanecha Adonai Elohai Hashem she'azartani l'sayim Masechta Beitzah kein ta'azreini l'hatchil masechtot u'sfarim acharim u'lesaymam. Lilmod u'lamed lishmor v'lasol u'lekayem et kol divrei Talmud Toratecha b'ahava. U'schud kol hatanaim v'amoraim v'talmidei chachamim yamod li u'lezari shelo tamush haTorah mipi zari v'zer zari ad olam. V'titkayem bi b'hitalelecha tanche otach b'shachbecha tishmor alecha v'kitzota hi tesichecha. Ki vi yiru yamecha v'yosifu lecha shnot chayim orech yamim b'yamina b'smala osher v'chavod. Adonai oz lamo yitain Adonai yivarech v'namo v'shalom.
Gadol v'yiskadash Shmei Rabu.
Amen.
Omudu b'chlisan. U'usit la'ach tuso. La'ach vayo.
Messiah.
Makaise. La'aska. Yasan. L'chayomo. Kato Yerushalayim ושכלו לו, חכו לו, בגבם מקר פרחונו, נברו Men aro la havo perchono di shmayo va asro yamlach mok kichibriki la am makam malchuzai yukure viat mokbukun Gurevich hai Chaya Chanu Yemechem Chaya Chabeis Yisrael Bakolo Ibez Ma Gurev V'Imri Umayin Yishmei Rabbo Yurach Almayim Yishburach V'Shtabach Yishbur V'Shremim V'Znase V'Saleh V'Salol Shmei Dekutsu Berichu Laila Mikol Bokosu Vishirusu Laila Vishirusu Bokosu Nechamusa Demir Miolmo Demri Umain
Amen.
Al Yisroel Almunum Al Tamidain Kol Tamidain V'chol Manda Oskedur B'Raisa Divaser Midain B'chol Asara Zara Ja, no, Shalom Rabba Chonu V'Chezo, Rachmu V'Chaim Arichem, Ziner V'Chem, Eperkodum V'Hu, Shmayu V'Mruayin.
Amen.
Ja, Shalom Rabba Shemayu, Chaim Paim Molaynu, V'Kol Yisrael V'Mruayin.
Amen.
Ay Shalom Ramov, V'Rachmu V'Yas Shalom, Olaynu V'Kol Yisrael, V'Mri Umayin.
Amen.
I
Mazel tov, mazel tov.
I have to invite to mention at least the Kaddish, but I lost my parents, Yoseph Dov, Ben Meir Moshe, Shendel, Basakiva, Akiva, Ben Yosef Dov, Yida Aryo, Ben Yosef Dov, Berifke Bas Yosef Dov. All these people, I don't have a day when I don't think about it. 6 million people, 1.5 million children. Don't forget it. Keep it.
Mazel tov, mazel tov. Should be a neshama, ili neshama, for all the Kaddishim.
Amen.
Mazel tov to all the Messiahim. We would like to finish off and call upon Rabbi Teitelbaum, Rabbi Emeritus of Israel Lawrence Cedarhurst, who's been very close to the Rubin family.
Elaine, Moshe, Mazel Tov. You'll forgive me, I have to put Elaine first. Ezer Kenegdai makes it all happen. We know that you're here, Baruch Hashem, Ad Me'evi Esrim, thanks to your mishpacha. That's made it all possible. That's granted you with Hashem's help, Arich Siyamim Vishanim. Elaine, you should be well and strong and extend strength to your wonderful husband. He should continue to learn one machzor after another after another. Rabbi Elefant, we spent a lot of time in a very different kind of time and place. It's wonderful to see you here and for you to be with us again. There's so much that binds so many of us in this room together. I'd like to say a couple of words about the Beis HaKnesses, about our Beis Medrash. There are less than one full handful of us who are here for so many, many years. We just said in the Kaddish, with Moshe saying it for us, U'l'shachlel heichal begava, to beautify the Heichal Hashem in Yerushalayim Yira Kodesh in the time to come. What do we do between now and then? We beautify our communities and strengthen them? Verily, here, they'll be rebuilt there in Mirza Hashem, Chazal tell us. We're being meshachlel the heichal. We're making it beautiful here. And I don't only mean the beauty that surrounds us materially in this wonderful Beis HaKnesses, under the wonderful leadership of the Rav Trump and the lay leadership of Rabbi Hillel Abramson, helping us with so much else that goes on in education, lay leadership of Dr. Kellner. I'm talking about the spirit of Torah that emanates from this place, that inheres here in the Young Israel. And that you, Moshe, had so much a part of fostering that. You and those who are learning the Daf are there with the timidius, with constancy and consistency every day. It's wonderfully gratifying that an old chaver of mine from the yeshiva, Harav Ben Sion, is now saying Daf Yomi here. There's just so much that goes into being meshachlel heichalo begava, but we don't wait for it to happen in the distant future. We're doing it, building a Torah for community here, a Torah for the people now. To have now 3 generations celebrate All Daf, a grandfather, a grandson, to have it all happen here, it's very, very gratifying. I'd like to say a great thank you to the Union of Orthodox Jewish Congregations, to the OU. Because the OU has a mission, and it sees to its mission in such grand fashion. People think of OU, they think kashrus. Of course, kashrus. They think NCSY, of course, fantastic. And now it's spreading Torah in deep and significant ways throughout the world, using technological abilities that perhaps didn't exist 15, 20 years ago. Fine, that's exactly what we're supposed to be doing. So there's so much that I have to just say thank you for, and conclude by saying that, Rabbi Elefant, you said it without referencing the Gemara in Masechta Avodah Zarah. Gemara says, take all of what we just learned in Beitzah about preparation and answer the rest of the world that wants to know why they're going to be somehow not a part of the grandeur and glory to come. And the answer is, Mi shetorach be'erev Shabbos yochal b'Shabbos. Gemara in Daf Gimel and Avodah Zarah says it. As Rabbi Elefant said, it's all about being prepared, preparing for that time to come, preparing for an Olam Haba, using our every moment in Olam Hazeh, individually, as families, and as communities, for the sake of that Shabbos, the Yom Shekula Shabbos Umnucha, L'chai Elamim. Thank you all for being so involved in Misha Tarach. Rabbi Elefant, the OU, Moshe, Yoseph, Rabbi Trump, our shul, our Magidei Shir. Misha Tarach. Tarach doesn't just mean to do, it means to work hard. Misha Torach, Be'erev Shabbos. Mir Hashem, all of us will be together. Nochal b'Shabbos. Thank you and Mazel Tov.
Thank you again for all those that came here live and all those watching across the globe. Mazel Tov on the Siyum Beitzah. Starting Rosh Hashanah tomorrow, come join. 5 Masechtas, 5 months. Make a Siyum coming up right before Purim on Seder Moed. Come one, come all, and enjoy. Mazel Tov.